think we're ready to sort of get started now. I'll just do a quick introduction for everyone that's on the call. Hi, before we start, I want to make sure that you all know that this session is being recorded and the recording will be shared as part of a rollout of some content after the 1st of October. My name's Claire. I'm the business editor at Computer Weekly. One of my areas of coverage there is diversity in the tech sector. And I'm really excited to welcome you to this, which is one of our workshops that we're running as part of the annual diversity in tech event we run with Spinks. The wider event's on the 1st of October. The focus of that will be advocacy and the support of underrepresented groups in the tech sector. It's going to feature a number of keynotes and panels and various other things on that theme. So make sure you sign up to that as well after this if you enjoy this session. Today's workshop, though, which is being run by the Tech London Advocates Women in Tech group, is focused on the gender pay gap in the tech sector in the context of a post-lockdown world. We're hoping to cover several little bits and pieces, the gender pay gap, what that looks like for women and non-binary people who are parents, carers, or singletons during the coronavirus world. So without further ado, I'll let you know that questions in the chat are being monitored and you'll have an opportunity to ask those later. But for now, I'll pass you over to Suki, who's running the workshop.
Okay, well, thank you, Claire. Hello, everybody. I would just ask at this time that if you are participating, that you, I believe everybody should be on mute coming in, but if you accidentally, unmute yourself or get to unmute yourself, please just be aware of any background noises. I don't mind if I see your children running across the screen, ladies that are on the panel. I always think that's really one of the most ironic situations in what's going on in the world today, is that so many people, even though they're working from home, they're overly apologetic when they have their children disrupting a moment when they're on a phone call. They're over apologetic when a noise is made in their house. You shouldn't be. You're working from your home. And in this situation, any disruption cannot always be controlled. So that being said, we are all humans. There will be some disruptions. I right now have people on top of my roof, on the other side of the building, actually tearing down a chimney. So who knows? But this discussion, as you read in our little highlight blurb, is really taking place because even though we've had so many discussions around the gender gap, it hasn't gotten smaller. It just hasn't. And unfortunately, at this time during COVID, we know that it's going to be exacerbated for women, for carers, for mothers, for non-binaries, for everybody that is considered underrepresented in society. It is going to get significantly worse. And I don't know if anybody saw the news last weekend. Diana Rigg reported that she battled gender bias, gender pay gap, like, I want to say it was 120 pounds that the cameraman on the Avengers was being paid, and she was only being paid 90. So, and that was 54 years ago. And that's a percentage, 25% less, he was being paid 25% more than her. That still hasn't changed. So those are some of the things that we really need to talk about. It really hasn't changed significantly, but the ladies here on this panel, they are advocates in this area. They know a lot of stuff. They are also going to tell you their stories because they've all had children, except for me. I'm the singleton, non-mother. But they're gonna give you some background as to what they do and some stats on what they have found in their various pieces of areas of research. So we have Diane Grayson, who I always want to say your name, Grayson. Sorry, Diane Grayson, who is the managing. Oh, I forgot your title already. The managing director of Equilibrium Mediation. Did I get that right? All right. Sarah Luxford, who is our wonderful, and Diane Grayson, actually, Diane really did start this ethnicity pay gap initiative, which was absolutely fabulous. It really highlighted the fact that there is not just a gender pay gap or just a pay gap, there is actually an ethnicity pay gap. So really great campaign that she started. And then we have Sarah Luxford, who is actually the lead of the and co-founder of Tech London Advocates Women in Tech. And Sarah is a badass HR headhunter. If there is anything you want to know about headhunting, Sarah is the woman to do that. And she has been really spurring on the drive of gender payment and gender pay equity, gender pay equality, the whole mission for Tech London Advocates Women in Tech. It's its very beginnings back in 2015. Was it 15? I think it was 15. It's been a while. And then we have Victoria McKay, the new CEO of Tech Moms. Woohoo! She has a very illustrious career in the jewelry field. She was one of the first women to enter the sector and really spurred it on. She started the jewelry, I forgot what it's called, I wrote it down. The jewelry, come on, Victoria, tell me.
Women's Jewelry Network.
Women's Jewelry Network. I was going to say the Jewelry Women's Network. Great initiative on driving women into the jewelry industry, which, as we know, is male dominated, even though jewelry were usually the biggest buyers, biggest purchasers. And I always say this last name incorrectly, and I shouldn't. And that is the wonderful Toby Aridian. Did I say it wrong? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. No, you have to correct.
Sorry, it's O'Dane.
O'Dane. See, I always put the pronunciation the American way. It's a bad habit. But Toby is the founder and editor and lovely creative person behind Black Ballad, which is a newsletter. It does a whole lot when it comes down to Black women in the media in the UK. And she's been doing a lot of work in the area of pregnancy and Black women in the industries of, well, all industries and sectors, but around pregnancy and how job loss, employment, medicals, all of that is affecting Black women. But moving on with the discussion, because that's the important part. And I know that this is the time when most mothers are very busy, especially if you have school-age children. It is that time. This is the school run time. So for all of you that are here, we really do appreciate it, because we know that it's not the best time in the world for you to be on a call. When we initially planned this, it was during the lockdown period where people were at home, so it was a little bit more acceptable. And now back to school, and back to school it is. But ladies, and I can say ladies because it's just all ladies on my panel. Ladies, we all know that we've seen probably the numbers that are out there from the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, that this year companies that are 250 employees and over don't have to report their upcoming numbers of their gender pay gap initiatives and gender pay gap numbers. I mean, I'm wondering, one, your take on that situation for smaller companies, because the numbers aren't being shown. I mean, does anybody have any information on what they're hearing from their networks? I mean, I know all of you do have information, but what are you hearing from your networks about that particular initiative around the numbers not being reported? Are you getting kickback as to, you know, anybody who's working in 250 plus companies?
Hi, Ziggy. I'd love to be able to kick off with that one, actually, because it's something that's really, really riled me. Let's face it, we've only just really first started the gender pay gap reporting in the last couple of years. I understand to an extent pressures on organisations and the ability to be able to look at some of the short-term initiatives they need to take in order to contra the effects of COVID. However, what I would say to them, I would assume that companies of 250 plus would be in a position where they still have a stronger long-term strategy and vision. Now, to have that ability to look at that longer-term vision whilst delivering on the short-term impacts, you know, we're looking at inclusion, we're looking at talent, we're looking at culture and strategy, full stop. So I don't understand why companies would feel that they would not be able to report on that. My kickback around that would be that if we're not going to be looking at reporting at gender pay gap reporting this year, then we need to take accountability and responsibility. And my suggestion would be that, in fact, there's a lot of fear around redundancies. There's a lot of fear about the lack of apprenticeship schemes really fulfilling their potential. Why can't we therefore ask the government to, or request the government to therefore request of these larger organizations data around split in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of other constraints, of those that are being made redundant, so that we can see the larger impact on society. So across the board, full stop, more mothers than fathers at the moment are more likely to lose jobs, be it that they're being furloughed, they're juggling homeworking, they're having to get their stuff together in terms of unpaid childcare, which I am now experiencing myself as a new mother of a 3-month child, and that's just rocked my world. And there's a lot I can say about all of that. But I think what I'm hearing from the industry is that don't use COVID as an excuse. This is something that is tied into your longer term strategy. And at the end of the day, leadership is about, yes, being able to deal with the short term impact, but very much about tying that into the long term strategy and vision. And that's where we need this data from talent inclusion and the gender pay gap coming in.
Okay, ladies, I said just a discussion. So anybody wants to weigh in with their, with what they've been hearing, what they've been seeing, or what Sarah has just said. And
what Sarah said is correct. There is no reason why they shouldn't be able to do that. And I would even add to that is they have frozen that, but they're not even discussing the ethnicity pay gap as well. So there is a big issue here, and you've got to wonder, why is it? Why do they want to stagnate our progress? What is it that offends them so much that they don't want to pay us equally?
yeah, and as I was saying, the fact that even 54 years ago, this discussion was being started by, Diana Rigg, and when she said it, people didn't want to discuss it at all. She was sort of branded as, this obnoxious woman, the fact that she made a big deal about, oh, wait a minute, you're not getting paid. Why do you think you're worth getting paid equally to somebody? You're just a pretty woman in a TV, wearing a cat suit or whatever it was she was wearing, and he's a cameraman, he has technical ability. And one of the things that I was aware of recently was the organization Pregnant Then Screwed did a survey in July 2020, and they surveyed roughly 20,000 mothers about the impact of childcare closures and a bunch of different areas on their childcare and on the women. And the number was something, it was ridiculous. The data that came out of that really blew my mind, because they said that 15% of them had been made redundant or expected to be made redundant. And of those, 45% of those say that the lack of childcare played a role in why they were made redundant. And so I'm just wondering, Victoria, I know that you're probably seeing a lot of data from tech moms as to people that are saying, yeah, I'm learning a new skill. I'm a tech mom, I've been doing this at home, but what are they saying about the childcare factors about when they have to leave the home or potentially not leave home?
So the childcare factor is a massive thing. So our data is telling us that mothers are on average still across the country doing 5 hours of homeschooling a day, where fathers are doing 2. So the impact for a lot of mothers that we are talking to is that they are putting their careers on hold. So whilst I respect that the data gap isn't being picked up at the moment, it would be skewed from my perspective and my viewpoint. I think it would be skewed anyway, because we have so many people on furlough, and actually what we need to be addressing is the ability for the educational support to be there for children, because mothers aren't doing it, educating their children because they think it's nice to be able to take time off of work. They are taking this time because they are absolutely invested in their children's education. And especially when you've got the cohort that are a little bit older, that are now going into GCSE and started school after 6 months of being off, and then were thrown into mock exams within 2 days. You've got a lot of mothers who've spent the summer preparing their children, and the upshot of it is that they are therefore falling behind, and the perception of how they are viewed at work is being skewed, because that education is used as a childcare facility for some mums. And that's what we're hearing. There's a lot of mums very worried about their children and their own careers.
Yeah, do you think there's this, as I say, do you think there's a myth regarding the working from home benefiting women and mothers and, you know, those that are caring for others? Toby, do you think there is that myth?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I saw a stat, I came across a stat on The Guardian, that I think mothers are like, I think 4 times more likely to be interrupted while working from home rather than like dads. And that's because I guess how society has structured parental roles, right? Men have been, you know, taught, or we as a society have been taught, that men work, they go out, they're the breadwinners, whereas mothers, they're the primary caregivers. So children naturally interrupt mums even more. And when you think about like how that affects women's opportunity to make money, women's progress is going to be slowed down a hell of a lot by furlough and by COVID-19. And I wanted to kind of bring up this stat that I found, about women being 40% of women in the country work part-time. That's a ridiculous stat when you think about it, that we don't even have full-time jobs, because we know care is the single biggest barrier to women's progression in the workplace. So you think about the fact that we have 40% of women that are part-time already. How much work can they actually get done when they're at home? It's kind of a mindfulness, it's kind of a circle that we're going round and round in, that we're part-time workers, that when we are working part-time at home, we're constantly interrupted by our kids more so than men. And then when do we work? Like the mental health strains on women working during this time are so much more significant than men, I think, because if you're in the day trying to educate your kids, you're working in the night when they're sleeping, and you're not going to be as productive. And I think that's sort of an argument that people don't think about or don't consider about women's capacity to work, in terms of like the mental health repercussions of taking on that role of being the carer, even more so during COVID.
Okay. No, I think we all had that thought. I mean, whenever I hear people saying, "Oh, well, you know, you can just work at any time. You're working from home," you know, it's like, "Oh, you're homeschooling your kid. You know, you're taking care of your child. You can just, you know, work, you know, from 7 until 10 in the evening." It's like, what?
Also, to quantify what Toby just said, latest data is there are 6.9 million mothers in the UK that have at least one child at home under the age of 14. When you talk about 40% of the workforce, and you quantify that back in terms of actual numbers, that's 7 million. There's 7 million people that are under the strain of having to juggle multiple things: careers, home. I know, so I don't. My son's grown and back at home. He came back for apparently 2 weeks at the beginning of COVID, and he's stayed in the room. So now I'm looking after him. But my husband has 3 children, and I can tell you there is a significant difference when I have a 9-year-old, an 11-year-old in the house, and a 17-year-old. The amount that I get done and how productive I am on those days it's so obvious, because even though I'm only stepmom, it's still, they look to me for food, they look to me for help and assistance. And when I have to stop everything I'm doing, and you know, it's always they want to call, just they want some food, just at the time that I'm doing a call, and I feel guilty, because I don't feel like I'm giving them enough time. And I've had to lay out of homeschooling and helping with homework. I've done my round the first time. But I'm at that point where I know that I couldn't do my job and give 5 hours a day to a child to help them and do everything else. You know, we're known for multitasking, but is that because we have to, or is that because we're particularly good at it? I think it's because we have to.
And it's very true. The women's guilt trap. Is that me? The noise? There's a little bit of a background echo, but I don't think it's me. I have a headset on. But the women's guilt trap.
Yeah.
That's it's a big one. I think we can pretty much all say. I have somebody that I know who is a carer for her elderly grandmother, and because she was one of the people that was shielding, this woman also is divorced with 3 children, but she has her grandmother living with her, and she's a nurse. So she could not go to work because she was living with her grandmother, who was shielding, taking care of her grandmother, who was shielding, and also had 3 children. She couldn't put the children into childcare because you put the children into childcare, there's the possibility they may be infected, and she's also a nurse, so she couldn't go to work. So her income was impacted basically to 0. She got nothing. And, you know, I'm just seeing more and more cases like that of women that are employed, that are even self-employed, that their incomes are being reduced. I mean, what are you seeing, Diane, as regards to what's happening? Because we know a lot of nurses were people of ethnic backgrounds. I mean, what are you seeing in that gap of income with people that are working, that are ethnic, and people that were not working?
I think the people that I've come across have found it a struggle. I think what you said there, you know, a lot of the caregivers are women, and thus are not able to work because they're looking after people. And I think because of what's been happening, what they're now also starting to recognise is the issues relating to their pay versus their white colleagues' pay, and the unfairness of that, and that is causing a major issue for them being able to, you can't feel comfortable in those types of situations when you know that there are challenging issues around payment. Well, I think a couple of people have evidenced to me who are in the NHS that they've got to take other jobs. They've got to take other jobs because they can't afford to work. Well, they can't afford to live or what they're being earned, basically. So it's becoming a challenge. I'm a board member of a charity, and we look after people who've got mental health, and the people who are working for us, again, similarly, are having those types of problems, and it's becoming a frustration and causing anxiety amongst them. And we cannot go on like this continually. It really does have to stop.
Yeah, and then we haven't even talked about mental health issues. Yeah, I mean, and we haven't even talked about pensions, because we know this year the pension age appeal, that the state pension age appeal that women lost. So now we know that gap is going to get wider. So we haven't even gotten there yet. But Sarah, I did want to ask you a question about new mothers and self-employed mothers, like what you're seeing versus people that are employed. And as a headhunter, you're seeing a little bit of the both, the people that are employed that are moving to another job, and people that have been unemployed and coming back into the work environment. And what are you seeing? What are you hearing from women, specifically, I would say older women?
Thanks, Dookie. Wow. What a roller coaster, essentially, is how I defined it over the last couple of months. Look, if we hit off with childcare, I think what COVID has done is it has certainly exacerbated or put focus on the issues that we've had as a society in terms of infrastructure, full stop. It's just widened that gap. It's blocked that open, 100%. And my take on it and what I'm hearing from individuals, both in terms of women coming back to work, but also senior leaders, senior female leaders, but across the board, just leaders. The three areas that they're talking about is enhanced investment. We talk about wanting to get to a better equal pay of level. We want to talk about generating the UK as an economic go-to place where we're going to get out of this, we're going to be stronger, we're going to pull in it together, that kind of stiff upper lip that we have, or we're judged to have. But it's all around saying, actually, we really, really need to now seriously take a look at childcare. We seriously need to take a look at flexible working and ensure that that is actually put into job creation full stop moving forward. So let's face it, in this new normal, as we're talking about, and also apprenticeship schemes, because I'm equally just as worried young people coming into the workplace. So as a new mum myself, my world has completely and utterly transformed. My plans that I had for this year have gone completely out the window, both in terms of childcare and grandparents hopefully looking after the baby. That's not going to happen due to the fact that they are over 70, they have their issues, they've got their own bubble, particularly as we go through what looks like a second spike. It's going to be harder for me to be able to leave a baby boy in their care. But not only that, you look at what are the main things that people are really looking at in terms of childcare. The majority of new parents are looking at either nurseries or relatives, and both have been essentially severely affected because of COVID. Nurseries were already underfunded before this hit. So we've got a bit of a crisis as far as I'm concerned there in terms of funding. A lot of individuals or new parents, they probably look at their grandparents, as I've said. They might be in this new COVID regulations where that's not necessarily going to be possible, or where there might be issues around bubbles. And not only that, you've then got the concerns in terms of reopening the nurseries, making sure that actually they're safe, that they're going to be safe, that people are going to take the regulations seriously, coming back into these kind of areas. I also think that what I'm hearing from mothers, or particularly new mothers, I'm not going to deny it. I think being pregnant and having gone through this myself this year, during lockdown and during pandemic, I think we have probably been slightly more anxious than usual because of the various different restrictions. There's been a very big fear in terms of redundancy, because we are seeing that there are more redundancies coming through. New mums are worried that because they've been away, there's going to be a bit of a black mark against them, even though we have certain laws that are going to protect us at the end of the day. Can that be true? And I think there's a need for a call for extended, potentially extended redundancy protection, in terms of something as a positive action that the government could potentially look at. We have 52 weeks leave. Yes, it's one of the most generous in the world, but at the end of the day, pay is not. It's like it's 100 odd quid a week. Are you serious? How are we supposed to truly live off of that? I would personally really like to see some of the data around that to prove how many individuals actually take that full year against that pay, and how many individuals are having to be forced their hand to go back to work much more earlier because they cannot live off that kind of maternity pay.
Yeah.
Go on. I know somebody was Victoria, you were going to say something. And Toby was going to say something. Come on, just say something.
Yeah, it gets me very
Yeah.
angry. I don't know how anyone can be expected to live on £100 a week. I would say my son's 24, and it's risen, I think, by about £12 since I had my son. Now that's not even anything inflationary rates. Let's not talk about shopping bills. And I think that you know, I don't want to turn this necessarily into a political discussion, but if you look at the executive of the government, they're all men. And would Boris expect his lady, whatever her name is, if I can't remember, would he expect her to be able to live on £100 a week? And in COVID, when you are dealing with the fact that you might be discriminated against because in your workplace, because you're at home and you're on maternity, and the way that it affects you in terms of being on leave. The other thing is that self-employed mothers, the amount of them that have had to give up childcare during this period is ridiculous. So there's I think they're a lobbying group called Pregnant and Screwed, and they're reporting that 44% of self-employed mothers had to give up their childcare space during COVID. So, you know, there does need to be some kind of law and protection, and there also needs to be some kind of financial help enabled to mothers to be able to retain their childcare space, because you can't count on grandparents forever, especially if they're in support bubbles. So, and I'm seeing that when I'm talking to people all the time. The amount of prize we're getting for help and signposting is amazing. And we've got an audience of 300,000. I'd say I get 20 people a week coming to us just for advice because they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Toby.
I was going to say, I think one thing I'm hearing from... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
Happens to the best of us.
It's
Hello.
tech. Yep. Okay, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. I think, you know, from my community, I'm hearing that I think women feel like they're being penalized for making sacrifices for their family in the first place. Women often decide to be self-employed so they can work around childcare. They are the ones who decide to be part-time workers. And I think when we look at the beauty industry in particular, I know a lot of women who women make up 91% of the beauty industry. And I know a lot of like Black Ballad members are kind of part-time or freelance hairdressers or, you know, manicurists. And the beauty industry is one of the last industries to come back from COVID, and 91% of women make up the beauty industry. There's no denying that policies around COVID are inherently sexist. As Victoria said, you know, when you have a government that's so dominated by men, women are such an afterthought. And when we think about the sacrifices that women make against not having stability in full-time jobs to be self-employed, by being the parent who's not, you know, I think it's 75% of part-time workers in this country are women, and that's most likely because they are mums. And then 70%, I think was it 70% of jobs were taken away during the first 3 months of the pandemic. Again, women are hardest hit by the policies that we have in place when it comes to COVID. And I totally agree with Victoria that we have too many men making decisions on behalf of society. Women in this country contribute 40% of the GDP. Like when we stop women from working, we are limiting the contribution that they make to this economy. So nobody wins. It's not just about, okay, this woman can't go to work. As a society, we are not doing our best by everybody. And I think that's something that we need to really think about.
I would definitely say at this time that it's very noticeable when you look at the economy and the impact of what has happened to industry in this country. Because right now, you know, they're saying, oh, we need to get people to go back to work, restaurants, you know, beauty parlors, stores, all of these places that are mostly dominated by females as employees. But at the same time, you can't go back to work if you don't have childcare. You can't go back to work if when you do go back to work, your childcare is then stopped because somebody is infected and they send everybody home, and you have roughly 10 minutes notification. I mean, I've been listening to the radio and hearing stories of people, women that are getting calls while they're at work and they're working from home. A lot of these women that have been getting these calls, and they have to go pick up their kid from school because somebody in the school was infected, and now they have to have their kid come home and isolate until that person is either cleared or not. And so I'm not really seeing any government measures to cover those areas of impact which are inordinately affecting women, because they're already affected. It's just even more. So what I would like to see is us just collectively be able to get some ideas of how we're going to lobby the government, who we're going to get to lobby the government, because we have seen people like Dame Morrissey has been talking about it, you know, in the financial sector. Avia Cox-Wittenberg has spoken about it with her 50 Gender Plus initiative. We're seeing all these people talking about it, but we haven't really seen any coming together. And what we want to do is, this is just the kickoff of a series of events and talks that we're going to do around these particular issues, because we know post-COVID, and even COVID now, it is really women that are going to be driving the comeback of the economy, because women make up the majority of the service industry. And I see a question here about the tech in particular, which I thought was really funny. And what specific challenge does the tech sector cause, and what are the solutions? And I think that might hark back to Victoria's statement about male domination. But
I do have
go
a
ahead.
clarification on that question. Are there any tech sector specific challenges for singletons mothers and parents who, you know, like are caught up in the working from home gender pay gap, you know, like having to juggle kids and work at the same time? So are there any challenges within that are specific to the tech sector, is what was meant by that question?
I can share one. There's a startup that I was mentoring, and the majority of the team are male. So I think it's 5 men and 2 women. And 3 of the men on the team have children, but they have partners. The 2 women also have children. One of them has a newborn, and she just said, basically, I'm not going to be working during this time. But the other person, the other woman, has a nearly 4-year-old son. And during this time, because they are a startup, they're growing, they have been doing things globally. And they basically, you know, heads down, you know, oh yeah, you know, we're hustling, that mentality. But they have basically told her that she has got to be on call 24 hours a day. And when you have a child that age, you can't do it. Whereas the guys that are on the team, they have partners, and yeah, they're on call 24 hours a day, but they've been able to handle that because they have partners that are taking care of the child. Whereas, yeah, she has a partner, but she's the mother, so she's considered the carer of the child. And, you know, I mentor the team, and I've been trying to get the men on the team, to wrap their heads around that, because of the way that they have been brought up professionally, societally. They just think, well, she should just be able to handle it. She handles it with her in the office. It's like, it's a different factor. She's at home. And that's just one instance that I'm seeing, is that we still have the same train of thought, it's just moved from the office to home, and it's even more noticeable. But I don't know, go ahead.
So that's sort of a culture in the tech sector that's seen in this sector sort of more than in some other sectors. There seems to be this sort of culture of always on, get it done, you know.
Yeah, the hustle
happens when it happens. Yeah,
the hustle mentality. And now, because we are functioning more, I mean, we were functioning globally before, but even more so now, because you are at home, the hours of when you are working have broadened. I think the gray area is now a lot more. It used to be the gray area of, oh, do I call somebody at 5:30? Now it's like, you can call them at 5:30. You can, message somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning and expect them to get back to you at 7 a.m. Because they're working at home, that they'll be up. There's a lot of that. I think there's a lot more advantages taken of people, specifically women, and there is the guilt factor. and I do think that me being single and not having children, I'm not easily guilted, but I think there is a pressure when you are a mother, when you are somebody who's caring for an adult, a child, another person. You do have the guilt factor. I've seen people psychologically manipulate people that are carers, because you sort of have this button now that you want to say yes, you want to help. I don't know. Victoria, you have this look on your face.
Because it's one of the things that I think that people really, within COVID, there's been some great advancements in terms of like how the tech sector I see is way beyond like connectivity of, say, jewelry. Like nobody in jewelry had even heard of Zoom or was communicating through any kind of digital means, and they've had to adopt that tech. The tech that exists in this sector has been here for a while, and I should imagine there's been a lot of people talking on Microsoft Teams and what have you, so it's not new. But there does seem to be this kind of like common, it's okay, could you just? Well, actually, do you know what? Maybe I can't just. Maybe I've got to bathe my child. Maybe I've got to look after my house. Maybe I need to do some shopping. And, from a, we talk about diversity and inclusion policies, but from a this to me all roots down into diversity and inclusion very broadly. That the policies that are written by employers, whichever sector you're in, need to be absolutely fit for purpose. There's no point kind of writing a nice fluffy policy that kind of says, oh, mothers are going to work in our organisation. You actually need to enable those mothers to work in your organisation. So you need to give them true flexible working. And if you send them an email, you've got to understand they might not respond for another day. You shouldn't be guilty. You should know that it's okay. And during a time where redundancy is such a real threat for so many people, I just think that your employer needs to make sure the policies are in place. And actually, when you say, I'll get back to you, they need to just kind of like not make it so difficult for you, because you can't be doing everything to everybody all at the same time. And Toby's point about socioeconomic recovery, you also mentioned lobbying. Nikki Morgan, who's an MP, a couple of months ago, was talking about the fact that women should be front and centre to the part of recovery for social and economic reasons. There is an entire data set that supports that narrative. And ultimately, if we don't have happy women able to work, we also have role models in the home that should be force multipliers. And what tech government exists to serve is having that force multiplier at home. If mum loses her job, if mum's mental health breaks down, you're actually raising then a generation of people that aren't having that inspiration at home. And it just makes me just want to just like pull my hair and just, scream at people. Put the policies in place in the workplace that actually work, that are not just words on paper. And that's just kind of like a whole D&I thing. That there needs to be diversity in the people that put these policies together so that it serves everybody well, not just one section of society when, typically it serves a male of a certain age who is white really well, but doesn't serve anybody else particularly well. And there needs to be that diversity of thought to benefit workplaces in general. And if you say it's flexible working, it needs to be flexible working. That's my I'll just put that down.
And I just want to follow up on what you were saying, Victoria. Oh, is that me? Anyway, I was facilitating a focus group today, and basically what you said there is basically what people are saying to us, and it was more focused on progression of Black and ethnic minority people in terms of, you know, progression, etc. And a lot, the theme that came out of that, just one of the themes, was the fact that the people who should be doing the job are not putting in the right process and policies for everyone. They want to single a group out rather than talking about everyone. And one of the things I said to them is that organizations have forgotten one thing. They have a duty of care to their employees, and they've made that duty of care a small d, not a big D, and that should be at the forefront of the way that they look after their staff. And that's why we're in a position that we are in, because they don't see the duty of care that they have, and they're behaving haphazardly and not thinking about the people that they've got in their employ.
Diane, you're absolutely right. And you also, the other thing that needs to happen is those policies need to be done in consultation with the right people. There is no point me sitting and writing a policy about men. What do I know, really? You know, I don't subscribe to that model of thought. Oh, it's okay. No, we can write it because we employ women, and I've got a wife and a sister. Yeah. No, it's solved, and that's the root cause. The consultation's not there, and also the diversity. When you're talking about sort of Black communities, there needs to be an acceptance that a Black mother is 7% worse affected than a white mother. So it's compounding all the time. Exactly. And then if you go on to say you're a Black mother who is LGBTQ, it just, you know, that's another 13%.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy to me that I don't, you know, where we go in terms of lobbying to make it different. That's a different conversation, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very big conversation.
I think that is probably the big factor. Is like, how do we come together and put together not just a paper? I mean, we've all seen there's so many white papers. The ONS puts out white papers, you know, like the effective ways of how you're going to build, you know, a gender equality and a pay gender equality, you know, society in your company, blah, blah, blah. And they're just some talking points, and nobody adheres to them. They adhere to them in the fact that they put it on their website, they put it in a report, and then they don't do it. And I think there needs to be a point where we all come together and really push for it, because this is the time when new policies are being written going forward, because after COVID, although there won't really be an after COVID, that's a whole nother discussion, but moving forward, we know that the changes that are going to happen in society, the changes with the economy, are going to have the strength of either women or not going to have the strength of women. And I really do think going forward that women are going to be driving the economy. It's not going to be men driving the economy. They can try at this point, sorry men, but I mean, at this point, there can be that drive to get more construction, which is usually a male-dominated industry. But we all know the part that's missing in society right now is care. It is services. Those are driven by women. And those are the areas of society that they want to come back to work. So I really do think we're in a position of power. and I really do think that can be harnessed. And it's just really a matter of how we do that. I don't know, Sarah, you've got this look on your face. Go on.
Sorry, line of the century, well, line of this year. Anyway, you're on mute. Just the whole thing riles me. It just riles me. And you know, the fact that we're having to still be here talking about all of this stuff, 30, 40 years on, after, you know, key legislation has been brought in, etc. When are we actually going to get our act together and get some of these actions in place? And when is the government really going to take us seriously in order to you know, pass some of these new laws or propose new laws and get them to really hear about some of the actions? It was interesting to note over the COVID, or during the COVID period, there was a petition going around. I don't know if any of you saw it. It was around the extension of maternity and paternity leave by 3 months. I actually signed up for it, not because of wanting to get extra maternity, but the fact that I felt that the government as a whole just needed to have a discussion. The discussion needs to come up about the issue of social infrastructure, full stop, around jobs, around childcare, around equality, and it looks like there could be a discussion going ahead on the 5th of October in the House of Commons. So watch this space. Let's see if any of the recommendations that a lot of us fed into that report might actually come true, and that would be great. We just need people to really sit up and take notice. And if not, then at the end of the day, it's us to lead and continue the movement, and support each other at the end of the day. And I think it's coming into this in looking at the prosperity of the UK, full stop, unless we really start to address some of these key issues from a talent, from a culture, and from a social infrastructure perspective, we're never going to move the dial, and we're going to be stuck here, and we're going to be left behind. So I would say that we are equally at a crisis point in terms of how that's going to affect the UK economy.
Yep, and I think we're roughly around, I don't know, maybe about 10 minutes left, Claire?
Yeah, we've got
5 or
about
6.
10 minutes left. I've got a couple of attendee questions, if you don't mind me just popping up. One of them asks if, for companies with under 250 people, do you think there would still be information about pay scales for people in the same grade or doing the same job? Should there still be reporting for companies that are under the limit of people that the government asks?
I'm an advocate for full diversity reporting. I don't understand why it can't just change now. Why does it have to be a big thing? Let's do it across the board, and let's make it accountability related. Got to do it. Everybody. There should be.
So I think it's just, sorry, Toby, I'm just going to say.
No, go for it.
I'm going to say it's about doing what's right. It doesn't matter about how many numbers. If you've got 3 people, that really doesn't matter. It's about doing what's right for the people, nothing else. Why do you have to wait until you get to 250?
Yeah.
Just
That's
do
what
it.
I say. Yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is the general consensus. You know, it's why are you waiting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the other questions, I hope I've got this right. It took me a while to sort of get my head around it, but I think the question is, do other factors to do with diversity, such as race, religion, nationality, marital status, play an equal role in contributing to the gender pay gap?
100%.
Do we have any information on that? Like, do we have any sort of, like statistics on, like how those different aspects play into the gender pay gap?
I think from Fawcett Society might be the best place to look, because they do a lot of work, obviously, around gender, etc. So that might be a good place to look for that type of information, I think.
And I think like most individual industries are reporting on the ethnicity pay gap as well as the gender pay gap. Like, did you want to?
I'm just going to comment one thing. It's only 23% of the organisations that are doing it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. But like when I look at the media industry, I think it's because I'm a journalist. Like I think it's ethnic employees are paid 22% less in comparison to their white counterparts. So add that into 18%, I think is the figure, what we're paid across the board less than men. If you add those two together, I mean, I'm at a starting point that's way behind white female counterparts, because I'm juggling the ethnicity and the gender pay gap. I think the problem, if I'm completely honest, the gender pay gap discussion revolves solely around white women, and it's
yeah.
really dangerous, because
Yeah.
what you're happening is, again, you are excluding a whole set of people or a whole set of women who contribute to society economically. If we don't start looking at how ethnicity and religion affects non-white women, we are not going to go forward. We're not. We're going to keep being in this conversation. We're going to keep being going around in circles. And I think like the statistics for tech are appalling. I think that like the ethnicity bonus pay gap in tech is like 35%. We should not be comfortable with that. Like, and I think, and as I said, like, I think so often when I join in these conversations, the ethnicity part comes as kind of a last minute conversation and an add-on, whereas for me it's not an add-on. I'm adhering to both. It's from the jump I have to think about both, but when I'm in conversations it's kind of a last minute, let's talk about it for 10 minutes, which is why Black women and Asian women are so much more frustrated and we're not moving forward. So that's my passionate feelings on that.
Yeah, there's, as Rush just commented, that there's a lot of work that needs to be fixed in the tech numbers. And I mean, and that's one of the things that we are trying to do in Tech London Advocates and the Women in Tech group. I know Tech Moms is doing a lot of work in that. And Toby has really been picking up with Black Ballot and Diane with your work, which is why I asked you women to be here, because I know even though we didn't get to just talk numbers, because sometimes I know that you can put those numbers into a document, into a spreadsheet, and just share them. We can tell people to go to your websites and to look at the information that you have there, the reports and the sources, because there's a lot of information. We just want to be able to share, you know, what you're thinking, what you're hearing, because a lot of times people think that what they're hearing is just their friends. But in fact, it's all of us collectively, is that we all are hearing the same things. And it's just a matter of having the discussions, because a lot of people would think that only tech moms is only thinking about white women, but in fact they're not. Victoria and I had a very long discussion just about the ethnicity pay gap. And Diane, even though she's working extensively on the ethnicity pay gap, it's also about just the pay gap in general. It's so we need to make sure we are coming together and speaking about this and able to figure out a way to lobby together. It really has to be, because I don't care, you know, people always get mad, but I'm just like, the future is female, darn it. It is. I mean, half of the world's population, you know, the people that are bringing other people into the world, even if you no longer identify, you're non-binary, it does not matter. We need to recognize there's half of the world's population, and the economies get driven by women in the world. Women are the ones making the clothing, the ones that are in those supply chains, making sure that you get your food, making sure that, you know, power is running. You look at just the economic structure of the world, and anything that's happening, usually the baseline of that is women. And in this society, just in the UK in general, it's not recognized at all. It's not recognized at all. And I just think we need to come together, figure out some ways to lobby, and lobby hard. And one of the ways we need to lobby is we need to put more women in positions of power, and women that actually are supportive of other women. We reached out to people that were on, you know, in government, and asked them to come and be part of the panel. And the minute there's the possibility of having to be accountable by women, everybody backed away. It was, yeah, well, you know, the conflict. It's like they don't want to be questioned on the pay gap. They don't want to be questioned on the equalities for women, the human rights, the schooling issues, anything, because they know that when we do band together, we are a very powerful force. And I think that this is the time, especially during COVID, that we really do need women to come together, because changes happen when women come together and really, really force the issue. So that's just that's just me venting. Sorry.
And I think we're out of time as well, so that's a really good point to end on. I'm just going to highlight Ross's other comment in the chat, which says it's time to get tough, shine a light on good working practices, name and shame those who don't implement the recommendations being discussed. And I think that's a really good point to end on. So I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you especially to the panel and to Suki, and hope to see you all for the joint Computer Weekly Spinks DNI event on the 1st of October as well.
Yes, thank you very much for coming, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
And there's data. I already told everybody, go to the websites, get the data.
Yeah.
Because all of these women have really excellent data. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank
and
you.
it's good to see everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See you later.
Suki, you're the master, so you have to cut everybody off. You're in charge.
Yes, I am.